And that's a nice link really to our final moment for the evening, is to invite Pamela Woof. What did you say, the Empress of Dorothy? And is a real highlight for many of us, and to have known her and worked with her, and to learn from her. So this actually tonight is her inaugural performance on Zoom. This is a moment, again, we could do that round of applause and the beating of the drums.
Thank you, Jeff. And well, I'm deeply embarrassed, of course, and I'm very timorous of this machine, this technology, but I'm delighted. And I've been in a learning position, listening to everybody speaking about how they have contributed to the exhibition, which I think is just splendid. It has the clarity, but also the quietness, the understatement of Dorothy Wordsworth herself, her absolute modesty in presenting herself, and her ordinariness, as well as has been indicated by some of you, the way in which the wonders of the clouds, say, or the trees. There was a sea-like sound in the trees above our heads. The sea-like sound of the wind in the trees. Of course, they're walking in John's wood, the wood in which John, as it were, marked out a path where he had walked up and down in the wood, not far from Dove Cottage. So that there is the sense of the past in Dorothy's writing. That John is there. There's one moment in the journals, I think, where she says, "Thoughts of last year. I took out my old journal." She herself found the journal interesting to read, her own and her Wordsworth and Mary's and their friends' lives, as to what they did, how ordinary it was, and yet how wonderful. I lay asleep or lay in bed, woke late, prepared the goose for dinner, read a little of Chaucer, prepared the goose for dinner, and then we all walked out. Everything is there. Of course she prepared the goose for dinner. But before doing it, and on the same level of interest of herself as a full human being, I read a little of Chaucer. And then we all walked out. And as they walk out various times, of course, she does see the ordinary birch trees, and particularly their favorite birch tree, but can, if it has rained and the wind has blown, it is like a spirit of water with its glistening and glimmering and shining. It is like a spirit of water. It has, as it were, abandoned its botanical actuality and has become something infinite. And this happens all the time in Dorothy Wordsworth, and it's a very beautiful leap from the everyday. She can look at Loughrig just down the lake in the spring. and sees the hawthorn trees. They're not, they make the mountains different. Hawthorns, she writes, or something like this, hawthorns on the mountain sides, like orchards in blossom. Hawthorns on the mountain sides, little twisting, rough, ordinary moorland trees, like orchards in blossom. Orchards in blossom brings the whole notion of man's use of the earth as something that feeds him. It feeds him, the orchards, but it also feeds him spiritually. Like the trees compared with the leaves. The trees in wind, in another entry, roared, almost roared, and at one point roared. And yet at the same time, underneath the trees, the asses pastured in quietness, and the leaves pattered, so she could hear the sound of pattering leaves and the roaring of the trees in great wind. It reminds one that reading the journal makes one live in the present. It's a present tense on the whole, opportunity, and it's slow. It's particularly relevant to our world today because it is slow time. We go in the walking pace of Dorothy Wordsworth, in our own walking pace mentally as we read. We look at plants not just being, but in a way becoming. Things are in progress. She's able to live in the present immediate world of perception and feeling. And this is true whether it's her brother getting married to his sister's best friend in a way, and the transference of the ring. Dorothy lives in that moment, although this particular one is written in the past quite a lot, but it's written with such feeling that it's very vivid. The wearing of the ring that Dorothy has done the night before is a signal to both to Wordsworth that she endorses this marriage. She gives it the love that will be in a very spiritual and human way comparable to the strength of married love. And it reminds one that the unprotected, orphaned Wordsworth children became, as it were, parental and loving and protective to each other because they hadn't parents to do that. So that the love of the earth, the landscape, the trees is there, and the love of people. That's also been emphasized in the exhibition and by the people speaking here tonight, that Dorothy was companionable, communicative, liked society, and became part of it. She sent some goose to her neighbor, Peggy Ashburner, because they had too much and there are no fridges. So sent Peggy Ashburner some goose. Peggy Ashburner responded by sending her some honey. As Dorothy points out, she didn't really need the honey, of course, but it's the gesture that Dorothy was a friend of people and became part of a community. And people have emphasized in the exhibition and in what they have said tonight, how much community and neighborliness and kindness, how much that is important to proper living. So the walking, the writing, it's very interesting that she uses similes and metaphors, more similes than metaphors in her case, as like a poet. And they are there, the moonshine, like herrings in the water. Gives it all. The sea, full to the brim, or like a basin, full to the brim. That she brought the whole of life at one and the same time into a kind of identity, so that it is as a whole person. Of course, Dorothy could have married. She was asked in marriage at least once by a perfectly pleasant young clergyman, but she didn't love him in the way that Wordsworth and her brothers turning up in the middle of her orphaned adolescence were regarded as saviors and heroes. And also, she did go to the weddings of young ladies and women in Grasmere whom she liked, but next year, she often went to their funeral as they were buried with their baby in Grasmere churchyard. Or like Maria Jane Dewsbury, a good friend, a woman friend, who married and went with her clergyman husband to India. She was dead the next year with cholera. So that marriage was, in any case, an immense gamble. And Dorothy, in this countryside, which she loved, she could look at Knapp's Scar just down the road here. And if a cloud was upon it, it cut off the top of the hill. And so, as Dorothy points out, it makes the whole hill more massive because you can't see the end. One of the contributors to the exhibition, the artist, has spoken of how she writes about what is not seen as well as what is seen. And that's an utter example which he could note, he probably has noticed, that if you cut off the top of the mountain by the cloud and the mist, it then looks bigger, so that the landscape itself seems to be alive and moving and growing around. And these are things that keep the slow reading of the journal, because it's not fast, it's not action, it's not plot, it's not particularly a story, it's noticing and being. And the exhibition here on Dorothy Wordsworth does draw people to read, I hope. And certainly it seems to me it does, and I've been in the room and I've noticed people reading passages from the journal. It draws people into perceptions that are delicate and slow. And it's not only a most satisfactory way of looking at life, it is so different from our normal way of leading action and completion and getting there and competition. There is no competition. Dorothy can talk about how as a child she used to chase the butterflies a little, but did not catch them because she was afraid of brushing the dust off their wings. It's that intimate perception of the smallness of the butterfly, and yet, of course, it conjures up in our minds as we read it a summer's day, and that kind of beauty of children chasing a butterfly, but also it brings in the notion of death. She was afraid of brushing the dust off their wings, and at the same time, it's about life, because Wordsworth is sitting at the table in his shirt sleeves, writing the poem about the butterfly, which is a beautiful poem about time, about memory. And the journal does not exclude death. When Wordsworth and John go up on Helvellyn, Dorothy goes to the funeral of a pauper living quite near here, near Dove Cottage. Susan Shacklock, a pauper who'd just begotten an illegitimate child. She goes to the funeral and is struck by the sharp contrast, which is so moving, of the singing of the hymn of the friends of this man, who was a poor man, a pauper, and going down the hill towards the church, and then singing of that, but then noticing the green, beautiful sunshine on the fields, which represents life. So she is very interested in contrast. And there is a lot of contrast in the journals, light and dark, life and death. And new ways of looking closely and intently at the world, especially the natural world. For instance, when the sun comes out very brightly and wonderfully, Dorothy writes, the shadows of the oaks blackened, the shadows of the oaks blackened. It's a description of the effect of the sun, which is life and gloriousness. But she doesn't say anything about the branches, the actual living branches, but the shadows. The journal is full of shadows, and shadows have their darkness and the obverse of light, so that even in these very small things, as comparably, plants can also symbolize the joy of people, like the daffodils. They're jumping about practically in that field by Ullswater, and they're wonderfully full of vital life and activity. But that's because Dorothy's mind is happy. The world reflects us as we perceive it, or we find in it the appealing things which are permanent to being a human being, either being one of several or being alone. It's inexhaustible. It's quite inexhaustible. Seeing Coleridge at the end of the Alfoxden journal, as that journal finishes, and in a way only began because Coleridge had gone off to try and be a Unitarian minister in Shrewsbury from Somerset. Dorothy writes that she went out at Wordsworth and they saw, what did they see? Well, I can't just remember now what they saw, but a glowworm, heard the nightingale, met Coleridge, heard the nightingale and saw a glowworm. Those three things, met Coleridge. It says an end point has arrived on this screen. I suppose I should say goodbye. I'm very inarticulate, but there we are.
It was totally articulate, and I suspect what's happened is that we have a set time for the webinars, and we're sort of running out of our scheduled time. So reluctant as I am to do it, I probably should, Pamela, just so that we can sort of round up. But that was a really marvelous end to that evening. There's nobody better could have done that. Nobody who we would think of. I think I'm quoting an inscription from a book from Charles Lamb to Wordsworth, aren't I, when I say a better knower of Dorothy than Pamela Woof, and we'd all agree with that. And the comments in the chat, you can't see these, but the words that are coming up are things like wonderful, thank you, glorious, and somebody even wrote, I love Pamela. So that's going to embarrass you a bit, but there you are. You're just going to have to take that.
But I think what is important is that we should all go more than once, slowly, to the exhibition.
Well, that's a very wonderful endorsement, and we couldn't ask for more.
Read Dorothy Wordsworth and keep Dorothy Wordsworth around at home.
Well, I think we heard a lot of that tonight, didn't we, from the WI members who were saying that they were reading Dorothy more than they had before. So that's right. That is good. I will, just so that we don't run out of time completely, I am going to just say a thank you to everybody for this evening. Thank you to people in the audience. It's been a long evening, and thank you for staying with us. I'm going to thank, not by name, but I'm going to thank by theme. And if we think what we've enjoyed this evening, we've had the themes of Dorothy and the perspective of walking, of friendship, community, perception, home, life's journey, and then from you, Pamela, rounding that all together. What's interesting is that walking has appeared many times, and sketching we've talked about many times in the course of the evening. And what that really means is that the exhibition is a sense of creativity of today, responding to Dorothy's great words and her life. So do visit the exhibition. I will just mention one event coming up, because coming up, we're going to focus on two books. One is by Simon Bainbridge. The other one is by Philippa Harrison. They're not small books, but they are about the Lake District, and they are about the world that Dorothy knew and grew up in. And I think, aren't I, Hannah, it's the 17th of November. Yes, we're having a webinar with those two. Have you got anything to say before I say goodnight?
I will mention a couple more events, which I've also linked in an email I've sent to all of you lovely folk earlier. But we have Simon Armitage on the 9th of November online, so do check it out. The trailer's up as well, so you can have a preview of some of his wonderful works. And finally, our last event this November is a poetry event with Kim Moore and Catherine Towers, who will be launching her new book, Oak, about the life cycle of a tree. It's a beautiful poetry collection just come from Picador. So please do have a look. All of our events are still online, so you can join us from anywhere in the world.
And Pamela is in the Jerwood Centre. She lives on the other side of Grasmere. And to quote Dorothy, didn't you mention about the wind and the water and the spirit of water? Well, there's been plenty of that going on as we've been sitting here. So let's hope that you can make it safely home, and so to everyone else. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody who's taken part, and thank you, everybody who's stayed with us and enjoyed the evening. And we'll say good night and hope to see you in the exhibition. Good night.